Hello again, Craig here. We're going to try to do a video, it might be kind of long, talking about dosimeters. Now, there's not much on YouTube, so I figured I'd make a pretty comprehensive video, so it's going to be rather long, but I think it's going to be pretty thorough. Probably answer most any question you have about dosimeters. First question a lot of you might have is, what the hell is a dosimeter? Well, sometimes it's pronounced dosimeter, and if you think about that, dosimeter, a meter that measures your dose. Now, we're talking about radiation here. We're talking about gamma, X-ray, and also cosmic rays. These are the types of radiation these devices can. This is ionizing radiation. This is the radiation that penetrates right through walls, right through your body. This is the most damaging of all the ionizing radiations as far as your health goes. When we measure something with a survey meter, we're measuring in R per hour, Roentgens per hour. See that? Roentgens per hour. When we're measuring with a dosimeter, we're measuring in Roentgens. Not Roentgens per hour, just Roentgens. So think of this as your speedometer in your car. Think of this as your odometer in your car. Miles per hour, miles. So it tells your total dose over time. That's what a dosimeter does, a dosimeter. So this tells you what you could expect to get if you're out there for 1 hour and it read 1 on this meter. I'm sorry, if this was reading 1 on that meter, that means if you were out for 1 hour, you would receive 1 Roentgen dose. So this, after 1 hour, should show 1. There's lots of different scales, and we're going to be going over that and on what to select. People who work in industry such as nuclear power plant workers, X-ray technicians, maybe some welders, certain types of occupations, there will be an OSHA requirement to wear a film badge and, if they're at a higher level of a risk, also a dosimeter. Now, these dosimeters might be in the form of an electronic dosimeter. There's lots of other dosimeters out there. We're going to be specifically working with quartz fiber direct reading personal dosimeters. Quartz fiber because there's a little needle in there. I'm going to show on the screen a little idea. When I hold this up to the light, I'm looking at a scale. It doesn't matter what I point this at. A lot of people think, oh, there's something radioactive. I'll point it on it and it'll make it go up. No, that's not the way this works. You wear this in your pocket, and because ionizing radiation goes right through you, this picks up what you have received in the time period in which it was set. You set this to 0, we're going to show you that. You set it to 0, you wear it for a certain amount of time. The way they would do this for civil defense purposes, whoever was in charge of the shelter would see what it is out there right now. No, it's too hot today, nobody goes out today. Go out the next day. Well, it's getting better, but no, nobody goes out today. Keep going out until it becomes low enough where they can risk having people go out. Then, people that do go out are issued one of these. They wear them in their pocket. And they're instructed, I want you back here before it reads 30 or 50 or whatever number they choose. And then while they're outside, they can keep looking. A flashlight, a candle, the sky, anything that has a light source. That's all the reason you look through it. It doesn't have anything to do with pointing to what is radioactive to get a reading. That's not how this works at all. So you need a light source while you be outside looking, oh, we're up to 20 now, maybe we ought to start working our way back, and you get back to the shelter before you get too much radiation. There's a lot of choices in pocket dosimeters. So what do I pick? It's a common question I get. What do I need? Well, we're going to go over some of these. These are what they call, to be totally accurate about this, technically, these are what they call quartz fiber direct reading personal dosimeters. And we're just going to refer to them as either pocket dosimeters or just dosimeters. That's fine. So, a lot of choices here. So what do you pick? Well, the big difference with all these is the difference in scale. Like your multimeter, how you can switch it to different scales, that's what these are. Very briefly, 200 milliroentgen, 20 Roentgen, 100 Roentgen, 200 Roentgen, and 600 Roentgen. So what's bad and which one do you need? Well, basically, for civil defense purposes, we're going to talk about these 4. 200 milliroentgens, 20 Roentgens, 100 Roentgens, and 200 Roentgens. Those are the civil defense surplus stuff. And these are generally the cheapest you can find that you more likely own. Anything below 50 Roentgens, now these are civil defense numbers, anything below 50 Roentgens is no visible effects. So in other words, if you would take these up to 50, now these don't even go to 50, these first two categories. This one goes to 100, this one's 200. Anything below 50, no visible effects. So all these over here, no visible effects. If you took it to 50 and stopped, you wouldn't become sick. Now that's not to say 10 years down the road you get cancer, but that's a whole other story. You are surviving. Again, these are civil defense numbers. Now when you get up to 100 Roentgens, there's a possibility of, and it really depends on the person now, not everybody reacts the same way, it depends on resistance. The 100 Roentgen dosimeter, if you took it up to 100, you'd have some nausea, some loss of hair, about 2 weeks after the initial exposure. 200 Roentgens, now if you took it to 200 Roentgens, you would definitely come down with radiation, acute radiation poisoning. You definitely would get sick, but if you stopped at 200, you would survive, you would live. You'd be awfully sick, but you would survive with a 200 Roentgen dosimeter. Now 600, forget about it, you would not survive. If you receive 600 Roentgen, you would be dead within 2 weeks. So don't even go there, otherwise you won't be going anywhere. So let's go back on this end of the scale. So in these first two categories, now 200, back to here, this is a 200 Roentgen, and this is 200 milliroentgen over here. These are 1,000 times more sensitive. Now these are a lot more expensive. Here we have one by, this is a Landsverk, this is a Bendix, this is a Dosimeter brand, this is an Aerotech. These all measure at the tops 200 milliroentgens. These are what the industry would use if there's an OSHA requirement. So let's say a nuclear power plant worker, an X-ray technician, a welder, somebody that works around radiation workers that have a higher risk of getting a radiation dose. This is what OSHA would require. They would require a film badge for lower level personnel, but for higher level personnel they'd also require, in addition to the film badge, they would require a pocket dosimeter at 200 milliroentgens. Now 200 milliroentgens is only 2/10 of a Roentgen, and so you're not going to come down with anything using that. However, if you did that day after day after day, it starts adding up, and if you don't have enough time to recover, this could be an issue. So 200 milliroentgens is when you want to detect the most fine. There are some that are more sensitive to 200 milliroentgens, but they're very unusual looking, very rare, and they don't even always work in all chargers. But this is the lowest you're ever going to find, the most sensitive you're ever going to find, 200 milliroentgens. And this is what industry would be wearing when you see the hospitals. They only wear them for 8 hours. Then they turn them in, they get read, and entered into the medical records. You don't wear them for weeks at a time. That's not how these work. You wear them for an 8-hour shift, maybe a day at the most if you're as a personnel that's not involved in industry. They're really only meant for like a 1 day or less reading. They're not meant for long term. So 20 Roentgens, this one's made by Victorine, this one's made by Landsverk, this one's made by Bendix, this one's made by Aerotech, and this one is by Dosimeter brand. And these are the ones that you could easily top out and not have any worries about becoming sick. Just don't do that every day. But 20 Roentgen, you would survive most certainly without becoming sick. 100 Roentgen, now there's where you start getting into problems. This is a Landsverk and this is a Bendix. 200 Roentgen, this is these two are Landsverk. They're both Landsverk here. These first two, the gold one and the yellow one. This is a Aerotech made in North Dakota, and this one's a Bendix. And then here we have a Bendix. This is also a Bendix, and this is a Landsverk. And so all these are some of your choices, but to give you an idea, if you're looking through bins of them and you trying to get an idea what you got here without looking at the labels, on the civil defense ones, these black clips, the pocket clips, and that sometimes it carries on to industry. Black is the color code for 200 milliroentgens. Now these look kind of black, but they're actually a dark green. Green is 20 Roentgens. Silver is 100 Roentgens. Gold is 200 Roentgens. And generally they're either black or green with the 600 Roentgens. There's a lot of other dosimeters. For instance, this one's 500 milliroentgens. This one's 1 Roentgen. This one's 5 Roentgens. This one's 10 Roentgens, Canadian military. This one is a 150 Roentgens. This is a 450, and this is another 600 and some oddball ones here. So dosimeters come in a lot of different styles, but they all basically do the same thing. They're measuring your accumulated dose of radiation over time, gamma radiation. So this is a safety measure. Tells you how much radiation you've been exposed to over time. In the industry, they would set this at 0 at the start of their shift. They would wear them, and at the end of the shift, they would turn them in, and basically if it read anything, they probably would have to go back and do an investigation, and then that would be entered into your medical records, because people that work in industry can only receive so much radiation per year, or even per dose, before they get pulled off the job. And that's what these are for. Now, to give you an idea, as far as industry goes, for radiation workers, now this will vary from country to country, but in general, there's a little more complicated. I'm giving you simple numbers here. Radiation workers have an annual limit of 5 Roentgen. 5. So, not even as high as these. In other words, if they receive 5 Roentgen in a period of a year of total dose, they'd be pulled off the job. Now, pregnant, women that are pregnant, the number is 0.5 Roentgen. So, just topping this off about 2 times takes you to your limit. 0.5 Roentgens, because these are 0.2 Roentgens. Now, for non-radiation workers in the public, generally, natural background radiation, you're going to get 0.3 Roentgens in a year. 0.3. And you're going to get, depending on how much x-rays for medical testing and man-made sources, you're going to get about another 0.05 through x-rays and other man-made sources of radiation, ionizing radiation. And the annual limit for non-radiation workers, basically before you get kicked into a category where you have to start getting OSHA regulations, is 0.1 Roentgens. So that's on top of the 0.3 and the 0.05 I just mentioned. So about 0.35 you're going to get every year anyway, regardless whether you work in any kind of radiation environment. And you can another 0.1 on top of that to keep out of the radiation regulated area. So those are the basic numbers in industry. I have electronic ones, and I won't talk about them much in this episode here, but you can use Geiger counters too as a dosimeter in a way. They can be set up to have a cumulative dose or total dose since it was turned on. However, these types of devices, this measures alpha, beta, gamma, X-ray, cosmic rays. This measures beta, gamma, X-ray, cosmic ray. So you're adding more types of radiation. So these are definitely not OSHA standard devices. As far as there are other dosimeters that are definitely designed for this, but regular Geiger counters are not. But you could use them to get your total dose. Most of them you can even set to alarm at a certain point when you get so much radiation. So we're not going to be talking about Geiger counters today. The modern ones can be used that way. Older ones cannot. But they also have electronic dosimeters, which is going to be beyond the scope of this. There's so many out there. And most industry is getting away from this type of quartz fiber dosimeter, now going to an electronic one. The big advantage with these, as far as survival, especially, these will withstand an EMP. The electronic ones may not. So if there is actually a nuclear detonation, you can still rely on these, whereas your other ones you probably wouldn't be able to rely on at all. So these still have their place. Most industry, especially nuclear power plants, still have these. They don't use them, but they keep them on reserve, standby, in case they need them. So they still have their place. There's still nothing wrong with the old ones. These old civil defense ones are made in the 50s and 60s, and they still work. About 10% of what I have is bad, and I sort through them, and I check each one before I ship anything out, but you can get some bad dosimeters. And the only way to really check them, there is no calibration on these. You can only check them for accuracy. They're meant to be within a certain range of accuracy. If they don't pass the test on a device like this is one of the devices that's used. There's not many of these in existence. You got to expose them to high level gamma radiation. You're not going to be able to find anything to make these needles go up. There's nothing you're going to be able to own. Although the most sensitive ones, the 200 milliroentgen ones we're getting into later, you can put those on, let's say a Fiesta wear plate or a radium dial clock, and leave them on there overnight, and you can get them to usually go up to about 10 milliroentgens, maybe 20 milliroentgens. So you can get those to go up basically, but you don't really want to see a dosimeter go up at all. It's not a good thing. Depending on the scale, it makes more of a critical difference than the most sensitive ones. But these are not meant to be used for a long period of time either. I get so many people saying, well, I said it last year, and this year it's off the scale. We must have had a lot of radiation. No, that's not the way these things are designed. A pocket dosimeter is meant to be used like in an 8-hour or a day period. They're not meant to be used over a long period of time because virtually all of them can drift. I have thousands of them, about 10,000 of them roughly, and I could set them all at 0 today, and some of them might, a year from now, might still be close to 0, others might be off the scale. They all can drift a little bit. Basically, if your dosimeter doesn't drift off the scale, well, let's say if it doesn't visibly drift at all in a week, you're good to go. I wouldn't have any problems dealing with any dosimeter. In fact, that's the way I test them. If I set them to 0, a week later, if they're still 0, they're good. Now, that's not to say that a year from now, it'll be reading 50 or maybe even be off scale. But if it doesn't drift very much, even in a day, you're good to go. If you have a dosimeter that does drift, if you set it to 0, and then the next day it's reading 5 or 20, make a note of that. You can still use it. Make a note of that. In other words, if it drifts 20, put a note on there saying, drifts 20 in 24 hours. Drifts to 20 Roentgens. Then, if you really had to use that dosimeter, even though it's leaking, it's got a little bit of a leak, it's basically losing its charge. I'll talk about that later if I can remember it. Then basically, if you know how much it drifts, then in emergency you can still use it. And just if you use it for one day, then if you're reading 30, then that means, well, that day you got 10. You just subtract the 20 that you know it drifts. And you'll have to keep going back and checking it every once in a while and updating that number if it changes over time. Sometimes they drift so much that they go off the screen and you're going to have to get rid of those. There's not much you can do. Here's a last minute addendum to this video. Even though I already had it completed, I needed to throw this information in because it's very important. Dosimeters are useless without a charger. Here's why. Even though this dosimeter might have read 0 when you bought it, a year from now or 10 years from now, whatever, when you actually finally do need it, it's not going to be reading 0 anymore. It could be completely off scale, and in which case you wouldn't be able to reset it and you wouldn't have any idea how much radiation you have. If you're lucky enough to have it in scale, let's say it's reading 100 when you pick it up after an event, well, was that 100 from just the last day, or was it from years of drift? You won't know that. The only way to know that is to actually have a charger. You have to be able to reset this thing because some will have drift, some even visibly so. Some will just be out and out bad. I test them 4 times, even 5 times before I scrap them. So you need to have a charger. There's just no way around it. So do not own a dosimeter without a charger. Here's a tip also on how you can maybe revive dosimeters that seem to be drifting or even maybe drifting off scale overnight. Set the dosimeter to 0, wait a day, check it. If it drifted off scale, set it again, wait a day, check it. Set it again, set it 3 or 4 times. And sometimes that will actually make it to where it's reading normal again, where it's not drifting off scale again. So that's one thing you can do. You can try that. Another thing, if you have another problem you might have with these, if the needle actually doesn't appear anywhere, there's no reticle, I call it reticle sometimes. If there's no reticle visible, that little line, then what you can do, and your charger doesn't seem to make it appear, try wrapping it on a table. And try different directions. And try this way, try every way. Sometimes you can get that fiber needle to get jarred loose and appear again. That's not the ideal situation, obviously. If the needle bounces around, it's not smooth when you're using the dosimeter. If it jumps a lot, try that, or maybe it's not going to be working very well if it sticks, if the needle sticks. So that's one way you can take care of that. There's no battery in these, by the way. The battery is in the charger. The chargers look something like this. So the chargers have a D battery, most of them do, and you put it on top of here, you take this cap off, we're going to show you this later, cap off, and you charge it, and you move this little knob back and forth, and you can actually move that needle and put it wherever you want. You don't even have to put it exactly at 0, it can be at something else. And usually these things will drift off to the right. Some people like to set them in the middle of the scale, whether that be 100 or 50 or 100 milliroentgens, whatever. Some like to set it at the middle of the scale. Very rarely do I see them drift off to the left, so I usually set them at 0, so that way I can see how much they drift off to the right, because usually they'll drift off to the right. Very rarely do they actually drift off to the left. If they don't drift in a week's time, but you're good to go. Don't worry about it. You can't go and look at it a year later and say, oh, we got 20 Roentgens over the last year. No, you didn't. That's not what a dosimeter is meant to be used for. So that's one myth that I need to debunk right there. Because some people say, well, it's red. And here's another thing that can set these to move more than you might expect. Because I had one gentleman who has a radio show call me and say, hey, my dosimeter topped out yesterday, what's going on? Well, there's two things that could be. Number one, and I've talked to policemen all around the country, this happens. Sometimes certain radioactive things get moved in the middle of the night. No fanfare, they want protests, let's just get it done, nobody knows about it. Police escort, but let's just get it done. So some things can move, can be moved like that, and it could send your dosimeters moving, especially if usually that's only the 200 milliroentgen ones. Usually that's the most sensitive ones. The only ones you're going to see that happen with. Another thing that can happen is I could have all these dosimeters set at 0, and there might be a nearby lightning storm that creates just enough of a static that boom, it knocks all the needles out of place. So static electricity, because what you're doing here, you're putting extremely high voltage charge to this thing. And any change to do it, or walk around on a carpet, or rub it inside plastic, and it could make these needles jump. So that's another thing that could make the needles jump. If you find it suddenly jump, it probably isn't due to radiation, but it could be due to radiation, like I said, or it could be due to static electricity. Let's go over how to use the charger for these, the CDV 750 Model 5. All right, we're going to give a little instruction on how to use the CDV 750 Model 5. All these three are the same. These are the basic ones that were meant for civil defense. And this is the ones you're going to see mostly on the surplus market. And these first two even more so than this last one. What we're seeing here is Jordan Electronics out of California, Industrial Electronic Hardware out of New York, and Bendix out of Ohio. So these are the three you're going to see in the market. And you're going to see more of these than any of the other ones. And you're going to see more problems with these two than the Bendix. All right, let's show you how to use these. First of all, and they'll have dates on them of calibration dates, and it's just basically a check. We're going to undo this by unscrewing this middle thumb screw to reveal the insides. And this is where the D battery goes. Takes one D battery. Make sure you get the polarity right. Then take off your cap here, where your dosimeter goes, and then press this to test your light. You see that lights up, as it should, okay? And it should shut off when you release it. Sometimes it lags a little bit. If you have a problem getting it to light, because sometimes you have problems getting it to light, this bulb is not screwed in this particular model. This is Model 5B, Jordan. Just take it out, maybe rub it off a little bit, or rotate it around a little bit to get a good contact, and try your bulb again. And that's the way you can get it. Or, alternatively, if that still doesn't work, well, you can make sure you have a good contact by rotating your battery or cleaning the battery contacts to make sure it works. And see, right now, I'm getting nothing when I push this plunger. So that's probably my battery. Let's move the battery a little bit. See, this is a good example of what I'm talking about. Well, see, no contact. See, it's not working right now. Try rotating the bulb there. Now we're getting good contact again. They're kind of finicky. And if you still have problems with it, while you're holding the plunger, move this mechanism a little bit back and forth so you get a good contact. Sometimes it'll take a little bit of working to get it to work, okay? Finicky little bastard these things are sometimes. All right, let's show you how to do that with a different model, the Industrial Electronic Hardware. Same thumb screw, undo it, battery goes in the same way. Take off the cap, the dosimeter, and try pressing the button, and that one lights up too. If you have a problem with it, also same thing, move around this mechanism a little bit here, or rotate your battery around to make sure you're getting a good contact. Okay? Sometimes you got problems, half the battle is just getting it to light up. Okay, so we got these to light up. Let's give this a try. Now I already see this one I had tested before. It says hard to bring to 0, and we're going to talk about that here. Well, I better show you the Bendix here real quick. The Bendix you're going to have the less problems with generally. Looks a lot different inside. Battery only goes in one way. Take your cap off again, and then push the button, you get it light. This one's screwed in, and by the way, all these have a spare bulb in there. So if the bulb goes out, you still got a spare. The Bendix you're likely going to have the best luck with on the Bendix. I like the Bendix best of all three of these brands. Okay, take the battery back out again, and go with this one that's hard to set. Put my battery back in, test the light, and sometimes the light will work great, and then you put it down here, and then it won't work again. Now, I have written down here hard to bring to zero. So this one I've tested, and it's hard to bring to zero. It's not the end of the world. And here's how, if you have a problem with yours, here's how you can get around some of your little problems. Screw it down tight, and then press to see if it lights again. See, it still does light. A lot of times you'll screw it back down and it won't light again. So you got to go back in and mess it again. Okay, we're going to use this dosimeter to try to set this now. So basically you put it on the contact. It has to be nested in there so it can't move back and forth. When you press down lightly, it lights up and you can read the dosimeter. And you press down a little bit harder and then you can actually adjust the needle. And basically when you adjust the needle, you're just moving this knob back and forth and the needle will go left and right as you move it. So put my eye down there and I adjust the needle and it's going in place. I can see it. And if I let go of it, let's see, put it on 0 and lift up, and this one jumped a little bit. It's very common for these things to jump after you pull it up. Here's how you can get around that. Well, first of all, you don't always necessarily have to have it exactly on 0. If you can't get it to 0 for the life of you, if you can only get it to 30 or 20 or 28 or whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as you know where you started at, you can still use the dosimeter, just making a note where you started at. That's the simplest way to get around some of these problems with these units that sometimes are finicky. So here's a way to get it. If you get it exactly where you want it and you pull it up and you find it's jumped, maybe off scale even, or it's jumped from where you had it, you can try to compensate by that. If it jumped 50, you can try going 50 the wrong way or whatever. You can try to adjust for that. And again, as long as you can get it close. As long as you can get that needle in view, usually you can still use your dosimeter. But here's a trick that I learned years ago of how you can get it to be more accurately stay at 0 when you're having problems with a jumpy dosimeter charger. Now, they're not really supposed to jump, but most all of them do, okay? Somebody that's great in electronics can go in here, read the schematic, and test everything and find out if it's a resistor or capacitor, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. It's not really worth me, since I have thousands of these, it's not really worth me going in and try to solder on every single one of these to get them to get them to work exactly as they should. So they're all basically a little finicky. But here's how you can work this and get the needle closer to where you want it. Basically, as you're adjusting it, get it to where you want it, and when you start lifting up, you're going to notice the needle moving around. And if you pull up slowly, I'm releasing the tension on the dosimeter slowly while I am adjusting the knob. My hand's blocking it here. While I'm adjusting the knob, I can actually get it to more accurately stay where I want it to be. So generally that would require you to be moving the knob slightly counterclockwise while you're lifting up. And if you try that several times, get some practice, and you're going to be able to do what I'm telling you. You can get that needle to stay closer to where you want it to be in the end. So when it's hard to set, that's a little trick. As you slowly lift up on the dosimeter, slowly move this knob, usually it's counterclockwise, and you'll keep that needle close to where you want it, closer, and you get good enough at it, you can get it almost every time to get it right on 0 or very close to 0. So that's a good way to work with these finicky Jordans and industrial electronic hardware. Don't ask me to get you a Bendix. I don't have, probably 95% of them are these two brands. The Bendix, I do have a few, but they're few and far between, and they're in boxes, and I don't know where they're at, and I can't really sort out to get you a Bendix. But, for instance, let's get into this box here. This is how they come. They actually come 50 of these boxes to a case, and I don't remember how many to a pallet, but I got pallets of them. It also has a serial number on all these. The serial number actually, let me see if I can tell which way. I think this is the end that I can open up, or the instruction in the way. Yep. Okay, this is how they come. And the instructions are in there. There's matching serial numbers. You'll see that this one ends in 288, and you'll see there'll be a matching serial number on the box. So if you got originals, you'll have matching serial numbers there. Kind of a neat thing. Anyway, this is how they come, and you can see, leak proof. Well, it leaked a little bit. This might not have been opened in maybe 50 years. Who knows? So let's give it a shot and see what we got here. The kind of problems I end up working around all the time. Unscrew this, and I need to get my battery out of the one I was using, which was this industrial electronic hardware. I don't have two batteries here. Okay, this is a Model 5B. I can see right off the bat. Put your battery in. Sometimes this thing will be almost corroded on there. The difference between the pot metal and this metal. So sometimes you might have to put a tiny little bit of penetrating oil in there and to work it back and forth. Okay, we'll press the plunger here and it doesn't light. So let's first off rotate the bulb. Still doesn't work. Let's rotate the battery. There we go. Now we got it working. See? Then put together and let's see what this one does. Doesn't really matter which way this case goes. It's pretty universal. There's no one way, any way particular, but usually when they come out of the box, it has this warning label facing you. Okay, let's give this a try. Lights up, needle moves back and forth, and it's jumping around a little bit, so then I release it slowly, and I can get it to go. Another way to work through some of these problems with these things is try another battery. Literally, going from one battery to another might make the difference between it working and not working. Again, these things are finicky, so try a lower voltage battery, try a higher voltage battery, go back and forth. You'll probably be able to get it to work. Unless there's something really wrong with it. If you can't even get the needle to show up at all, then there's something much more wrong with it. If you can't get it to keep jumping completely off the screen, then there's something else wrong with it. And there are various problems. When I always test them, I always make sure I can at least get them close to where I need to get them without even having to do a lot of those fancy tricks that I just showed you. So that's how you can work through some of these problems with the CDV750 Model 5s. Okay, what's next here? How about let's go over the model CDV750-6, the Model 6. If you're fortunate enough to have a CDV750-6, it's a fine machine. It's one of the more expensive ones, and it's one of the newest ones too. If you look, we got the Civil Defense logo and FEMA designation. There's only a short period of time that could have happened in the mid-80s, so this is one of the newest ones that are out there. It's the only one with both designations on the same piece of equipment. Okay, this device does not take any batteries. It relies on a piezoelectric trigger. It creates a little bit of a charge. This button here creates a discharge to allow the battery to allow it to go the other way. This button here is a lever trigger, allows this back part to be adjusted, and we're going to pull this all the way out. Now the piezoelectric thing, if you ever had one of these, if you look in that little hole back there while you're squeezing the trigger, you'll get a confirmation it's working because you'll see a little flash of light. All right, this can be used with almost any dosimeter. Sometimes they're a little more difficult because of things on the dosimeter, like this one. This is a classic case. This is one of the hardest ones to set because it's got all this plastic on it, right? It should still be able to set ones with rubber or plastic ends, and it will still also set the all plastic Aerotech brand dosimeters. So you can use it in virtually all of the dosimeters, pocket dosimeters. You don't have to take the caps off, but I will have to take this end off enough at least. I'm just going to leave it dangle there. I'm not going to take it all the way off, just to show you, because I need electrical contact here to here. So this has got a mate in there, and it goes in about 1/4 inch first, and then you get seated right. Then pull the hand trigger, finger trigger, and then now we have tension on the dosimeter. Now it does not require electrical contact here. That's why the plastic ones even work. All you need is electrical contact there. And if you have problems getting electrical contact, if you start using it and it doesn't seem to do anything, rotate the dosimeter back and forth a little bit while it's under tension, and that will maybe rub off any little oxidation and get a better contact. Okay, that's usually the #1 problem you're going to have with this model, is keeping a good contact. If you still have a problem keeping a good contact, sometimes you'll have to even use your thumb to press on it a little bit to force it to get a little bit better contact. That's usually the only problem you're going to have with this unit. Now, the best way to use this when you're lining this up, because I have a little bit of shakes, and I've had shakes since I was a little kid. Basically, put this at your eye socket, the bone of your eye socket. In other words, put it right up here. It's not touching my eyeball, but I'm using my eye socket to brace it. So now it's much easier to hold, even with my shakes. And then I've squeezed the handle a few times. The needle usually starts off far off the screen onto the right. And so you have to push the trigger about 3 or 4 times to get into view. Now it's at 200 milliroentgens. And now it's past 0. That's where I want it to be. A little bit past 0, a little bit left of 0. Now, that's when I use my little finger, this little button, to discharge it, and the needle actually goes back the other way, and I want to put it exactly where I want it to end up. In this case, since I'm using a 500 milliroentgen dosimeter, so remember that the 200 and 500 milliroentgens usually have a secondary line left of 0, and it's there, so that's where you set it at. So when you release it, usually that needle will be right on 0 when you're done. So take it to exactly where I want to, push the button, Then I release it, that's where I want it, and I take it off, and I can still see that I am on 0. So that's the way you use the CDV750 Model 6. Okay, next let's go over some, how about some of the strange kits there are out there you might see on the internet. Let's show you some other oddball stuff I've got here. Little things you're going to find on the internet. This is a German set. It's got 500 Röntgen dosimeters and 50 Röntgen dosimeters. Total of 12 of them, it looks like. This is the charger, dosimeter charger. A very strange looking one, but these are actually, this is a very nice set. If you get to come across these, probably end up paying more than $100 for the set, but it's a really nice set. I would highly suggest you getting it. Dosimeter goes in here, under that cap. Batteries go down in here, and this is your adjustment right here. And this is the light. Actually has a built-in light. So very nice set to have if you can find it. Get your instruction manual back there. Here's a industry set. This happens to be by Victorine, and these are Victorine dosimeters. Also a nice set to have. In industry they use these a lot for welders, for hospitals, and so you'd have a whole crew out there using the dosimeters and one base unit for people to come to reset. Now these two kits here were made for civilians. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a huge demand for something. Because survey meters would cost so much, and dosimeters, and all this was basically government issue stuff, they came up with these two kits. One of them for $34.95, the other one for, I believe it was $24.95. They come up with these two kits, one by Bendix and one by Landsverk. Now, most of them you're going to see are this color here. I couldn't find any in the warehouse at the moment to show you, but basically most of them are going to look like this, of the Bendix variety. But basically inside they're the same thing. You have a dosimeter charger, same exact Bendix model, except it's just got a different paint scheme. Then you have a rate meter and a dosimeter. Now the rate meter, actually, this is the most unique thing about these kits. They didn't make this for the military, and they didn't make it for civil defense. This rate meter is basically a dosimeter that has a scale in there. You use a timer, usually either with a 1-minute timer or a 10-minute timer. You set it to 0, take it outside, and then start your stopwatch, and you watch that needle move. And either the 1-minute scale or 10-minute scale, it will give you a rate in Röntgens per hour. Whereas this one, and this is curious the way they included this is a 600 Röntgen dosimeter. I'm not sure why they included that, such a high value with a civilian kit. But that's a 600 Röntgen dosimeter. Crazy, crazy high. They should have included either a 100 or maybe even a 20 in this kit instead of a 600. But anyway, that's what they did. Here's the manual. Now this kit's from Landsverk. This is similar. It's got a dosimeter charger made by Landsverk. And those same type of two dosimeters that are actually, one's a rate meter, and one is actually another 600 Röntgen dosimeter. But this rate meter is a little bit different, also not made for the military or civil defense. This rate meter goes from 20 Röntgens to 200 Röntgens as a rate meter. So these are both kits that were meant for civilian use as the huge demand after the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. If you come across these are really nice to have. This is the Stevens brand from England. Very nice the way this one works. The dosimeter goes on there, and this nice big knob. Really smooth operation. If you can find these are very worth much the money. These are those Stevens dosimeters. They get much more expensive, especially when you talk about this one here, which is the Star Wars one everybody wants at the science fiction shows. And you see they're color coded too, black, blue, white, different scales. So the Stevens is a really nice one to have. Canadian ones, this is a Canadian military. They're pretty nice. These are actually 10 Röntgen dosimeters. Canadian Admiral, this is a Canadian one, and the case, this is how they come in the case. So these are nice to have, but and they work fairly smoothly when you find one that works, because frankly I don't find too many that work, but they're nice when they do work. Now a quick note about the CDV model 138 pocket dosimeter. This is the 200 milliröntgen one. This is the one that's most sought after generally. It's the most sensitive, the 200 milliröntgen one. The reason I'm bringing this forth to you is because these are the only ones that were actually used for any purpose whatsoever in civil defense. And they're going to be beat up. Yeah, you're going to find a lot of them on the market, and it's very common to find them. It's going to be hard to find one that is not beat up, because these they actually used. They used these for training purposes. So all the other ones are going to generally look a lot cleaner than these. There's nothing wrong with these. I'm just giving you a pre-warning that you're going to have a hard time finding them that are in really great shape, because they've been through the ringer. They've had a lot of use for them. This is the only ones that would actually be used. So just a little pre-warning, the Model 138s are generally going to be looking not as good as the others. Okay, next let's delve into some military stuff you aren't likely ever to see, but you might find them online. Okay, here's some U.S. military stuff you might find online. These are difficult to work with. Well, first of all, this one you're not going to find much of. This is actually a chemically based dosimeter. See the chemical, the vials in there? It's from 1955. It made in 1954 and 1955. Lead lined. This is kind of a rarity. This is a chemically based pocket dosimeter. You're not likely to come across this, and you can't recharge these, reset these, so it's really just a collector's item. So forget about those. In the 70s, this was a popular to set a military dosimeter. But actually, these will set any dosimeters. It doesn't have to be a military one to set a military dosimeter. You can set the military ones with the civilian ones too, or the civil defense ones. Basically, you get this, recognize this cap. That's where the dosimeter goes. So the dosimeter goes on there. And the thing about this one, it's a pain in the butt because you need 3 hands to use the damn thing. I mean, literally, you need 3 hands to use it. Because while you're pushing down on this to view it, you're turning this knob. This knob is rather stiff. It goes back and forth to increase or decrease the voltage. And the problem with this one is, first of all, it's stiff. Because what's going on inside there's no battery in this. There's a felt wipe in an aluminum cylinder which creates a static charge. And so essentially you have to turn it about 20, 30, 40 times to get the needle to appear at all. And it gets very tiring. Plus the fact that since there's no battery, there's no light inside. This is a small prism that's the light is supposed to go inside and then up into your eye. Unfortunately, the light is generally not strong enough to be able to see a damn thing. So you need to have a third hand to hold a flashlight, like so. That's about the only way you're going to be, or else have somebody else hold the flashlight, or get it near a table lamp or something where you got a good light source. That's the only way you can really use these things. It's really difficult to use. Now, before that, they actually had a better system. Back in the 60s, this was one. This is also a dosimeter charger. Take the cap off. The dosimeter goes into here. And then you turn this wheel and it tightens it to where now it's locked in place. And you look straight through it because, as you can see, that's where the light comes through. So you basically hold it up and look through it to a window and then turn this knob. This knob is what also a felt cylinder, a felt wipe in an aluminum cylinder. It's very stiff, very hard to move, but there's also no battery in this. But this, at least, you can use with 2 hands. Still real difficult to use, but this is a 2-hander. This one's really a 3-hander. So I wouldn't even really recommend these, frankly. They're just too hard to use. Yeah, there's no battery, but they're hard to use. These are the cases for them. This is how they come with the case. Let's go over now this little guy here. Now, it's really beyond the scope of this video, but I wanted to run through this very quickly because a lot of people are curious about it. This is a Radiac set, ANPDR75, and it reads these dosimeters. Now, this is sometimes referred to as a TLD, or a thermoluminescent dosimeter. This is in form of a wristwatch, but it comes in many different forms. And let's open it up here inside. You'll see this is the device that actually reads it. And this, back in 1988, when this was issued, this particular model, these were actually about $2,900. So this is not something you're going to be able to easily find or even utilize if you were able to find it very easily. It takes a special type of power supply too, usually hooked up to a 24-volt system for military vehicles. But it also has a battery capability and an AC adapter capability. Anyway, this is what they call a phosphate glass gamma dosimeter, and has a neutron diode. Now I'm going to take this apart so you can see how this works. Take the band off. They come in different forms. This one's a watch band. And I've already used this special tool to remove the back, to loosen it up, because it took a little time and effort, so save some time. And basically, I'm going to have to put a close-up of an image for you showing here. This is actually a radio photoluminescent glass block, that rectangular thing there. And inside is a neutron diode. Now you expose this to UV light, and it heats up, and you can read it with this machine. There's a display here this is not on right now, but this is where the business happens. You put this on this little tray, and it indexes on so it doesn't move. And inside here you'll see 8 contacts that connect with the metal contacts there. You close this, slide it back in, and press this button, and it heats up, and then you'll get your display, and it'll read the value of the dosimeter, which will be anywhere from 10 Roentgen to 600 Roentgen. So that's the basic operation of the MPDR75. Okay, I hope that covers everything. I thank everybody for watching. So long.